The party was in full swing, the low hum of chatter and clinking glasses weaving through the air. Jake stood near the bar, his fingers curled loosely around a glass of whiskey, though he had barely taken a sip. He didn't need the warmth of alcohol tonight. He had something else keeping him steady. Across the room, Vanessa threw her head back in laughter, her hand resting on the arm of Ryan, her new lover. The man was all charm. Too much of it, Jake thought. The kind of charm that slicked itself over weakness, a mask for something rotten underneath. Jake had known this moment was coming. Vanessa had been growing distant, her words sharper, her patience thinner. He had seen the signs, the way she lingered too long on her phone, the sudden, inexplicable need for late nights out. And now, here she was, ensuring that everyone in their social circle knew exactly where she stood. "He's not man enough for me," she said, her voice loud, deliberate. A cruel smirk curled her lips as she sipped her champagne. The room fell into a hush before someone let out a chuckle, breaking the tension. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Hesitant at first, then bolder, emboldened by Vanessa's confidence. Jake didn't react. He simply held her gaze, a small, unreadable smile playing at the corner of his mouth. Ryan, ever the opportunist, tightened his grip on Vanessa's waist, pulling her closer. "What can I say?" he said, flashing a toothy grin. "Some women just know when to upgrade." More laughter, more murmurs, a performance for their audience. Jake nodded, as if conceding a point. "You're right, Vanessa," he said smoothly. "I suppose we were never quite the right fit." Vanessa blinked. She had expected anger, humiliation, a scene, but Jake was calm, composed. That wasn't what she wanted. She wanted him broken. She wanted to see him flinch. Instead, he lifted his glass in a toast, his voice even. "To upgrades," he said. A few scattered chuckles followed, and just like that, the moment passed. The attention shifted, the party moved on, but Jake saw the flicker of unease in Vanessa's eyes. A seed planted. She had no idea what was coming. By tomorrow, the game would begin. Vanessa was giddy with triumph. The look on Jake's face, calm, detached, hadn't been what she expected, but she told herself it didn't matter. He had lost after all. She had upgraded. That was all that mattered. As the party carried on, she stayed close to Ryan, draping herself over him like an expensive shawl. Every laugh, every whispered word was meant to remind everyone, including Jake, that she had moved on. Ryan played his part well. Maybe too well. He enjoyed the attention, soaking it in like a man who lived for an audience. Jake watched from a distance, but not with bitterness. He wasn't drowning his sorrows or throwing back drinks like a man scorned. No, he was patient. He understood something Vanessa didn't. There was no need for revenge when arrogance did the job for you. The days that followed were like watching a slow mission collision. Vanessa, convinced that Ryan was her golden ticket, started making moves that would later haunt her. She put her name on the lease for a high-rise penthouse. She transferred money from joint accounts into one she shared with Ryan. She ignored the few concerned glances from friends who wondered if she was moving too fast. Ryan, ever the charmer, knew exactly what to say. "We're building something together, babe. I need you by my side." Vanessa, always wanted to chase the illusion of a fairy tale, believed him. Meanwhile, Jake didn't beg, he didn't call, he didn't fight for her. That, more than anything, unsettled her. Late at night, as she lay beside Ryan in their overpriced penthouse, she found herself staring at the ceiling, waiting for the satisfaction to sink in. It never did. But she ignored that nagging feeling. She had won, hadn't she? She convinced herself that she had, until the day she woke up to an empty apartment. At first she thought Ryan had stepped out for coffee, but the longer she waited, the more something felt wrong. His closet was empty. The drawers, once filled with his expensive watches and cologne, were bare. Her stomach twisted as she grabbed her phone, calling him once, twice, straight to voicemail. Panic rose in her chest as she logged into her bank account. And then the final blow struck. Her balance, once comfortable, was drained. The savings she had transferred, gone. Credit cards, maxed out. The truth slammed into her with brutal force. Ryan had played her. All the sweet words, the charming smiles, the whispered promises. It had all been a carefully crafted illusion. He had never loved her. He had loved what she could give him. And now, with nothing left to take, he had vanished. Vanessa sank onto the cold tile floor. her breath shallow. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had been the one in control, the one who traded up. But now, as she stared at the empty space where Ryan once slept, she realized she hadn't traded up at all. She had been traded, and she had lost everything. The silence in the apartment was deafening. Vanessa sat on the cold tile floor, her fingers trembling as she refreshed her bank app over and over, hoping, praying, that it was some kind of glitch. It had to be. There was no way Ryan could have drained everything overnight. No way she could have been that blind. But the numbers on the screen remained unchanged. 0. She choked on a sharp intake of breath. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she scrambled to her feet, nearly knocking over the expensive glass coffee table she had insisted on buying for their dream home. A home she had paid for. A home that now felt like a tomb. Her fingers fumbled over the screen as she called Ryan again. Straight to voicemail. Again. By the 10th call, her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. She turned, wide-eyed, scanning the apartment for some kind of sign, a note, anything. But there was nothing left of him. His suits, his watches, even his ridiculous designer sneakers. All gone. The only proof that he had ever lived there were the empty hangers in the closet and the faint scent of cologne lingering in the air. And then, like a cruel whisper of fate, she saw it. A single sticky note left on the kitchen counter. Babe, it's been fun, but I think we both knew this wouldn't last. No hard feelings. Best, Ryan. Her stomach clenched so tightly she thought she might throw up. No hard feelings. No hard feelings. She gripped the note, crumpling it in her fist as a strangled sob tore from her throat. This wasn't happening. She had been the one in control, the one who called the shots. So how had she ended up here, abandoned, broke, and completely humiliated? A knock at the door jolted her back to reality. For a second, hope flickered inside her. Maybe it was Ryan. Maybe this was all some elaborate prank, some twisted game he was playing to get a reaction out of her. But as she rushed to the door and swung it open, her heart plummeted. Wasn't Ryan? It was the building manager. Miss Carter? He said, his expression apologetic but firm. I'm sorry to disturb you, but your rent payment didn't go through? We need to discuss. She slammed the door in his face. Her legs felt weak as she stumbled back into the living room, her mind spinning. The rent, the bills. She had been so caught up in her new life with Ryan, so convinced that everything was perfect, that she hadn't even considered what would happen if he walked away. Because in her mind, he never would. But now now she had nothing. She got her purse, rifling through it with growing panic. Her credit cards had to work. She had always had credit. Her fingers found her sleek black Amex, the one she had been so proud to flash at expensive restaurants, at boutique stores, at parties where she made sure everyone knew she was living the dream. She tapped it against her phone, opening her banking app, and her breath hitched. Declined. Her stomach dropped. She tried another card. Declined. A third. Declined. Ryan hadn't just emptied their shared account. He had used her cards. Maxed them out. She clutched the phone in both hands, her vision blurring as reality crashed down on her. Everything was gone. The money, the security, the illusion. A fresh wave of nausea rolled through her. She had traded stability for excitement. She had mocked Jake for being too predictable, too boring. She had laughed in his face, humiliated him in front of their friends, confident she was winning. And now she was the fool, and there was only one place left to go. With trembling fingers, she scrolled through her contacts, hesitating for just a moment before pressing call. The phone rang once, twice, and then on the third ring, Jake picked up. There was silence. Vanessa swallowed hard. Jake! Her voice cracked, the weight of her situation pressing against her chest like a vice. I need to see you. A long pause. Then, his voice, steady, unreadable. Why? Tears welled in her eyes because she had nowhere else to go, because she had burned every bridge, because after everything, the only person who had ever truly cared about her was the one she had thrown away. Please, she whispered. I need to talk. Another pause. Then finally he exhaled. Fine. The line went dead. Vanessa lowered the phone, her pulse hammering in her ears. She had convinced herself Jake would always be waiting for her, that no matter what, he would take her back. But as she grabbed her coat and stepped into the hallway, an unsettling thought crept into her mind. What if she was wrong? Vanessa had never felt this exposed before. The cold night air bit at her skin as she stepped out of the high-rise building, the one she had once proudly called home. Now, it felt like a monument to her arrogance, a symbol of everything she had lost. Her designer heels clicked against the pavement as she made her way toward the cab stand, but there was no confidence left in her stride. She clutched her phone tightly, the brief conversation with Jake still replaying in her head. Fine. That was all he had said. No anger, no concern, no curiosity, just one word, clipped and final, and somehow that scared her more than if he had screamed at her. The taxi ride was painfully silent. The city lights blurred past her window, but she barely noticed. Her mind was too full of questions she didn't want to answer. What would she even say to Jake? That she had been wrong? That she had been played? That she had chosen a fantasy over reality and ended up with nothing? She had always prided herself on being in control, on talking her way out of any situation. But now she wasn't sure if there was anything left to say. The cab pulled up to a quiet, tree-lined street, one that still felt familiar even after all these months. Her heart clenched as she stared at the house. Their house. The porch light was on. Not for her, probably just out of habit. Vanessa stepped out of the cab and hesitated. She could walk away right now, save herself from whatever was about to happen. But she had nowhere else to go. She took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. A few moments later, the door opened. Jake stood there looking at her with the same unreadable expression he had worn at the party the night she had humiliated him. He hadn't changed much. Still sharp, still composed. The only difference was in his eyes. There was nothing there for her anymore. "Vanessa," he said evenly, "what do you want?" She swallowed hard, suddenly feeling foolish. I just needed to see you." Jake leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. Why? Things not working out with Ryan? The way he said it, so casually, without a hint of surprise, made her flinch. He already knew, of course he did. Jake had always been the kind of man who saw things coming long before anyone else did. "He's gone," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "And so is the money." Jake didn't react, he just nodded slightly, as if confirming something he had expected all along. Vanessa felt her throat tighten. "I made a mistake." That made him chuckle. Not a warm, amused chuckle. This was cold, almost pitying. "A mistake?" he repeated. "Vanessa, a mistake is ordering the wrong drink at a bar. What you did, that was a choice." She had nothing to say to that, because he was right. Jake sighed, stepping aside. "Come in." For a moment, relief flooded through her. Maybe, just maybe, he still cared. Maybe he would let her stay. Maybe he would understand. She walked in slowly, memories hitting her like waves. The familiar scent of sandalwood and leather. The couch where they used to curl up on movie nights. The framed pictures, still on the walls. Except now, the ones of them together were missing. He had erased her. She turned to face him, her carefully rehearsed speech crumbling under the weight of his gaze. "Jake, He held up a hand, stopping her. "You don't have to explain," he said. "I already know how this story goes. You thought you were trading up, but the guy you picked was just using you. Now you're broke, alone, and you think I'll take you back." Vanessa's stomach twisted. "I didn't come here expecting—" "Yes, you did." His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "'Cause you always think people will clean up your messes. But not this time." She blinked, stunned. "Jake, please." "I don't have anywhere else to go." For the first time that night, something flickered in his eyes, something close to amusement. And whose fault is that? Tears welled in her eyes, but Jake didn't move. He didn't offer comfort. He just studied her, as if deciding whether she was worth any more of his time. Then, finally, he walked over to a small table near the entrance, picked up a small box, and held it out to her. Vanessa stared at it. "What's this?" "Your things," he said simply. "The few things you left behind. Thought you might want them." She swallowed hard, reaching for the box with trembling hands. It was light. Too light. Jake watched her for a moment, then gave her a small, almost cruel smile. "You were right, Vanessa," he said. "I wasn't man enough for you." He stepped back, gripping the door handle. "But I was smart enough." Before she could respond, before she could try to argue, to plead, to fix things, he shut the door in her face. And this time she knew he wasn't opening it again. Vanessa stood motionless on the doorstep, gripping the small box like a lifeline. The night air felt colder now, wrapping around her like a punishment she had earned. Jake's words echoed in her head, cutting deeper than she had thought possible. "I wasn't man enough for you, but I was smart enough." She had expected anger. She had expected hesitation, maybe even the faintest sliver of regret in his eyes. She had expected a second chance. But Jake had been waiting for this moment. He had let her believe she was winning, let her build a castle on sand, only to watch as the tide came in and washed it all away. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the lid of the box. Inside there was almost nothing. A few old trinkets, a pair of earrings she had left behind in their bedroom, and a single photograph. It was a picture of them from years ago, on their anniversary in Paris. She remembered that night vividly. The way Jake had surprised her with dinner at a rooftop restaurant, the way he had looked at her like she was his entire world, and the way she had already started pulling away even then. She had told herself she wanted more, that Jake was too stable, too predictable, that she needed something exciting. And now she had nothing. Her phone was dead, her bank accounts empty, the so-called better man was gone, and there was no one left to call. A distant sound of laughter carried through the street. Inside, behind the closed door, Jake was moving on. She didn't know with who or how, but she knew one thing for certain: Jake would be fine. He would rebuild, he would thrive. And she would be the woman everyone whispered about, the woman who had it all and threw it away, the woman who traded gold for cheap glitter, only to find out too late that it was worthless. Vanessa let out a shaky breath, blinking back tears she refused to let fall. She turned slowly and walked down the steps, her heels clicking against the pavement. She had no plan, no destination. The world stretched before her, unfamiliar and unkind. For the first time in her life, Vanessa Carter was truly alone, and this time there was no one coming to save her.